conference of the Inside Turkey Journal, and this is going to be our second session. We're going to deal with a very complex question, which involves many actors, not only Turkey, but also other regional countries like Iraq, Syria, Iran also. So we are talking about a complex question, a regional question, and a question where the Kurds have different realities in different countries. Though the affairs of the Kurds in one country have a strong impact on the affairs of the Kurds in another country. Kurds also face, a lot of complex challenges in different countries. And just to name a few, the emergence of self-governing areas in northern Syria, on the background of the civil war, the ongoing civil war, is one question. How sustainable is it? The antagonism between the PKK and the KDP in Syria as well as in Iraq, the rivalry, the competition, the clashes, the ongoing clashes between Turkish security forces and the PKK in the southeastern Turkey, the tension between the KRG and the central government in Iraq, the Baghdad government, the disagreements between these two actors on energy issues, the sovereignty issue also, the sustainability of the non-conflict era between the Iranian government and the PJAK. And we are quite lucky to have a great panel of speakers today to address this question, this quite important question of the Kurdish question from different angles and approach the question from different contexts. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a special focus on Turkey and Turkey's Kurdish question, and then go regional. Maybe have opportunity to talk about the other actors that I mentioned at the very beginning. So we are going to start with Mr. Etyen Mahcupyan, who has a very long resume, so I'll skip many of them and I'll give you a couple of points only. He's a very prominent journalist writing for the Akşam Daily, my own colleague from the Akşam Daily newspaper. He has a BA in chemical engineering from Boğaziçi University and his first master's degree in business administration from Boğaziçi University and his second master's degree in political science from Ankara University. He wrote for several newspapers and currently writing for the Daily Sabah and the Akşam newspapers. Between 2012 and 2015, Mahcupyan served as an advisor at TESEF, and on October 2014, he was appointed the senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Turkey, Ahmet Davutoğlu. Mahcupyan is also one of the founders of PODEM, a well-known research institution in Turkey. So, Mr. Mahcupyan, you have 10 minutes, and I'll remind you about your timing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ufuk. As I'm not an expert on Middle East, and I'm not an expert on foreign policy as well, I will concentrate on Turkey, the Kurdish issue in Turkey, and start from a bit behind, just to be fair. Now, when we say we are mentioning Kurdish question, we are in fact depicting a situation which is common in many parts of the world. We have a nation state and we have a minority. Now, this situation is much more black and white than many other places, because the nation state which we have in Turkey is a nation state created by the army and the statist elite, and they have identified what the nation is and also the national identity as well. And they have found a centralized system around that. So at the end, we have a proper citizen, which is secular and Turk. So everyone should turn into the proper citizen in time. This was the expectation. On the other hand, we have the minority, the population of which is above a threshold. You cannot get rid of them very easily. No. Most of them are concentrated in a region, southeast of Turkey. And they have a socio-political background which is quite different from the rest of the country. Meaning they have governed themselves for so many years in the Ottoman Empire. Now, on top of that, both sides are very authoritarian. They nourish from conflict. The structure, the decision-making structure on both parts, I mean the state, the Turkish state, and the PKK now, or the Kurdish movement, was based on the existence of conflict, in fact, the stability of the conflict for so many years, decades. And on top of those 2 points, we have another one, the psychology, which reminds me of the diasporan Armenian psychology in a way. And in a nutshell, it asks, what will history write about me in the future? So this is the feeling of responsibility towards future. And it shows itself, it manifests itself in this way. When we look at the state or whoever is at the government, the people there, the who take the responsibility of the state are afraid that they will make a mistake, and that mistake will mean another defeat in the long run collapse of the Ottoman Empire, like losing some land and or something like that. And on the other part, when we look at PKK, we see the psychology that puts a pressure on those people, saying that there may be a new opportunity in future, and their job is to take that opportunity, whatever the cost is. So when we look at the picture, at the end we can understand why we have 2 maximalist actors vis-à-vis each other. And if we are looking for a solution, we can be sure that there will be no solution here. This will go on and on. Now, how can we reach a solution? If that is the question, then the answer is if the conditions change, if the actors change, or if the mentality changes. And that happened in the years 2002, 2004 with AK Party. Now, at that time, I have to remind that PKK went through another cleavage from inside. More or less 2,000 people had to run away from Kandil. And those people were defending to solve the Kurdish question in a kind of a more peaceful way, or the civilian political way, or something like that. So when we approached 2004, we had much more stubborn PKK and pro-war, pro-fight PKK. Now, AK Party had 3 advantages, and they used those 3 advantages. One, they were coming from the periphery, so they needed the reforms and the democratization for themselves as well. Second, they were Islamic, so there was an Islamic sensitivity which allowed them to be less needing the Turkish identity. So it was easier for the Islamic people in Turkey to take distance to the Turkish identity, which was very statist or pro-statist. And the third, AK Party was coming from a different mentality. They were not authoritarian, but they were paternalistic, which meant that when they look to the society, they did not seek a homogeneous society as an ideal, but a heterogeneous one like in the Ottoman Empire. So when you combine those 3 things, to be pro-reform, distance from Turkishness, and heterogeneous society as an ideal, then we can understand how they moved in a way to a mid-ground. Now, before AK Party, when we look at the Kurdish question, on the one hand, we have assimilation, the state's ideal, and at the other hand, we have independence as PKK's ideal. With AK Party, we had this middle ground, and of course with Öcalan. And we had now 3 options, and we still have those 3 options. The first option is equal citizenship. This means that Kurds will get whatever Turks are getting. Nothing more, nothing less, but this does not say anything about the relation between state and society. If it's not a very democratic society, Kurds are expected to say yes to that society as well, because Turks are saying yes. You see. So this is the idea of the first option. Second option was self-governmental rights. It implies decentralization, of course, and guaranteed by a constitution. And it also implies surely local governmental agencies or authorities eligible to make decisions in this or that area, whatever the areas are. The critical thing is that whoever is elected will rule. So if a Kurd is elected or the Kurdish party is elected, Kurds will rule, Turkish party is elected, Turks will rule, whatever, or non-Kurds. And the third option is territorial rights for the Kurds, which implies a pre-decided region, quote-unquote, belonging to Kurds, no matter what demographic changes occur in that land, in that part of the land. So again, in the micro level, whoever is elected will rule, but there is a meso level now for the region as a whole, where Kurds are the majority and they will rule. 5 minutes, okay?
Okay.
So now what happened with these options? AK Party went from the initial position of the state to the first option, which is equal citizenship. And Öcalan, and called this integration, quote unquote. And Öcalan came to second option. And in fact, Öcalan called his option as integration as well. But in the end, there was a gray area between these first and second options, and there was peace, as a ceasefire, because AK Party was ready to implicitly accept second option as long as Kurds were ready to integrate. And Öcalan was ready, the integration, quote unquote, as long as AK Party did not block the way to the second option, which would come by reforms and democratization and so on. But this gray area was not stable at all. It went for 3 years, and AK Party had to deal with a political turmoil. They were a bit vague, they were slow, and so on and so forth. And then we faced Syria. Now, with Syria, there were new opportunities, so the conditions changed. And the conditions allowed PKK to move a bit away from Öcalan. And when we are making an analysis here, we have to add Russia besides Syria, because you cannot build self-confidence on the existence of Assad, but you can maybe build confidence on the existence of Putin, looking from the PKK side. Now, since the opportunity in Syria is similar to the third option, so it's territorial rights, PKK is having or trying to make a symmetry between Syria and Turkey and pushing the third option now. And AK Party went back strictly to the first option, which is just equal citizenship. But we have an advantage here, we have a new opportunity, and that's the new constitution that we cannot run away from. No, we will have it. And of course the presidential system that AK Party wants. And that now implies that AK Party may be very ready to come to the second option, which was the Öcalan's option. Now, this, I think, is the necessary condition for any solution of the Kurdish issue. And if AK Party does this in the proper way, it may also be the sufficient condition. So I will claim that if we are looking an answer to the Kurdish question as such, the answer, the real answer, is still in Turkey and not in the region. If AK Party can manage this, then whatever happens in Syria, in the short or long run, that will push PKK either accept the second option or move away from the Turkish problematic and towards the Middle Eastern one. So it will be a Middle Eastern actor. And why is that? The crucial thing, I'll end with that, because the Kurdish public, the Kurdish society is backing up this second option, self-governmental rights, and it is always, historically, pro-West, pro-Europe, rather than pro-Middle East and pro-Russia.
Our second speaker will be Professor Burhanettin Duran, who is the General Coordinator of the SETA Foundation in Ankara. He received his BA in Political Science and International Relations from Boğaziçi University, his PhD in Political Science from Bilkent University. He was a visiting scholar at George Mason University here in Virginia, and he was the head of the Department of Political Science and International Relations at Istanbul Şehir University. He is also a columnist for the Sabah daily newspaper in Turkey. You have 12 minutes. Adding the additional 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, actually, Kurdish issue of the Middle East is a regional challenge, but the excitement of the issue is a challenge to our panel, Mr. Mahcupyan. Well, you know, this regional challenge should be faced by both global and regional powers in this time of history. What I am talking about is the chaos, the disorder that coming out of post-Arab uprising environment. I think we all agreed on that this Middle Eastern chaos is not creative. On the contrary, it's a very destructive one, because the region faces humanitarian crisis, destruction, and all maladies of the war. For example, today's newspapers in Turkey are citing the death of 32 Syrian refugees in the Aegean Sea. So this is a major analysis, there's a major point to be made. Another one is all people in the region, and maybe many analysts in Washington, are talking about the new Middle East to describe the chaos coming out of this winter. Let's call it winter. Sykes-Picot, I'm referring to Sykes-Picot. All people are agreed on that Sykes-Picot is now gone. But who will form the new Middle East? People talk about US responsibilities, but we all know in Washington know that the US is not willing to do that. So if the question is who will form the regional order in the Middle East, if the answer is not nobody, there should be somebody to form this, including global powers like the US and Russia, and the regional powers like Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. But the Syrian civil war created two major crises, two major processes, I should say. The first one is the sectarian divide, sectarian polarization, which is not just about theological differences between Sunnis and Shiis, but it's about ideological and national competition of regional powers. So the second one is Kurdish nationalism, Kurdish ethno-nationalism. In the Syrian civil war, these two phenomena is intermingled, is interrelated. And this represents a major challenge to Turkey as well, not just to Iraq and Syria and others, the unities of Iraq and Syria. Yes, of course, Iraq and Syria are failed states, but in the region there are some states to be candidates of failed states. Of course, not Turkey, but there are some other regional countries, for example, many of them in the Gulf countries, they may face very easily this crisis of failed state if there is a further polarization of this sectarian divide. Yes, I said it's a challenge. Kurdish issue is a challenge to Turkey. Etyen actually underlined three aspects of it. One is this Syrian affair, the Syrian civil war, so much affected Turkish reconciliation process. You know, in 2013, there was a brave attempt of AK Party to end this question by talkings with Öcalan and indirectly with the PKK. But what happened after 2013 March, when the Abdullah Öcalan's letter to the public was announced, was Gezi protests and later Kobani protests and the worsening of Syrian civil war, and PKK left the or did not committed to the promise of disarmament. So here now, for the time being, it's very difficult to make or to say that let's go to the table for Turkey and PKK at the same time. What I am saying that simply because of the chaotic conditions in the Syrian civil war are not suitable enough to make another attempt of reconciliation process, going back to reconciliation process. Simply because the PKK favors the Syrian conditions on behalf of PYD and to have a legal status in Syria, an autonomous region. Of course, this is very related to Turkey's southeastern cities. You know, in 12 town centers of southeastern city, PKK is trying to establish autonomous zone or autonomous spheres to make a control. And this makes the problem even more complex. And when the Syrian civil war continues in that way, after Russian involvement, it's very difficult to talk about going back to the process. Well, to handle the Kurdish question in Turkey, we are talking sometimes about democratization. Yes, democratization is needed, and Turkey has to continue with democratizing political system, giving equal citizenship rights or others and others. But still, this is not the crux of the matter. If the Syrian civil war continues in that way, PKK will try to maximize its benefits in this war, and it's not easy for Turkey to make this issue as peaceful, so it will continue to affect what's going on in southeastern Turkey and in Syria. Yes, there can be, Öcalan can be an opportunity for this, for solving this problem again. But again, I should argue that this is not the right time for both parties, for both Turkey and PKK. I understand that my analysis is not so much optimistic. It sounds as pessimistic, on the contrary. But, you know, realists are not disillusioned. So we have to face this reality. And of course, this Kurdish question has many aspects, including US, Russia, Iran, and other regional actors. But of course, the US has a specific role to play in this question. You know, PKK was considered as a terrorist organization, but PYD is not. And Turkey is insistent on saying that there is a direct link between PYD and PKK. Now what's happening as a reliable, it was a reliable actually force to combat against ISIS, but PYD is losing the ground when there is a deal between PYD and Russians. So I expect that in the eyes of Washingtonians, PYD is losing ground to become a reliable factor. But still, there are some opportunities for the US to support PYD. But it has to be limited because the complexities of the Syrian civil war are becoming more critical for Turkey's security issues and the relations between the US and Turkey in the future. If there should be a constructive relations to continue with the strategic aspects, there should be a comprehensive solution for Syria. Yes, it's not very easy to have a comprehensive comprehensive solution to Syrian crisis, but still the US should understand the security concerns of Turkey. These are not just security, humanitarian security issues. It's at the same time, it's a question of national unity. We should admit that. But as my last sentences, when there can be back to resolution process, if the PKK feels that they are in the position of 2013 May, when the Öcalan newsletter was announced, then we can talk about this, because otherwise the AK Party cannot face the nationalist sentiment, the Turkish nationalist sentiment, to criticize you failed and you are trying to do again, and it's not enough to face this criticism. And maybe you remember Öcalan's letter was talking about a new identity of national unity for Turkey, a civilizational perspective that was shared by the AK Party and Öcalan's letter at the same time. So for the short term, for the next 1 year, that's why I don't expect a possible return to that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duran. Since I added 2 extra minutes to the speakers, I don't want to lose any time and give the floor to Dr. Denise Natali, who is a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Strategic Studies, where she specializes on the Middle East, transborder Kurdish issue, regional energy security, and post-conflict state building. She is the author of numerous publications on Kurdish politics, economy, and energy. Just to name one, the Kurdish quasi-state, development and dependency in post-Gulf War Iraq. You have 10 minutes. If you insist, you will have 12 minutes. Okay?
Thank you. I won't insist. Thank you to the SETA Foundation. I'm glad to be back. I just have a disclaimer that these are my views and not those of the U.S. government, Department of Defense, or National Defense University. What I'd like to do is look at and situate Turkey's multiple, what I call multiple Kurdish problems, and a trans-border problem, how it has changed, what's the same and what's different, at least over the past 5 years. I want to look specifically into each of the different Kurdish problems, not so much as in Turkey because it's been covered. And then I'd like to offer some prescriptions and advice moving forward, or counsel moving forward. What are the opportunities for Turkey in managing some of these problems? So I see 6 changes, or 6 different ways in which this transborder Kurdish problem, which many of us have been watching over the decades, are different. First, this is the first time since the state formation period in Iraq, Syria, and Iran, and Turkey, that all of these Kurdish groups, let's leave the Iranian Kurds out of it, are mobilizing at the same time for Kurdish nationalism. During the last few decades, you've seen various Kurdish movements, nationalist movements, but they have not occurred simultaneously. Secondly, which makes this, again, all the more pressing for Turkey, we also have an ISIS, as was presented by Professor Burhanettin. You have the ISIS campaign. And the Kurds have been able to benefit, to gain semi-recognition, semi-legitimacy because of the U.S. policy of enforcing local partners on the ground. This has all worked into the Kurds' favor. There's always been a strong relationship with the United States government and the Iraqi Kurds, but what's changed is, as Professor has indicated, that now you have what we call the other Kurds, the PKK Kurds, the Kurds that were affiliated with the groups now into the fold, and as I said, semi-legitimized and emboldened. That to me is an important change. And then of course, when you're in this situation of not being fully legitimized, you thrive on external patronage, whether that be through coalition support, whether that be through Russian support or any other support. This is how some of the Kurdish groups have advanced some of their claims. There are, according to some of my Syrian Kurdish colleagues, there are Russian troops in parts of the Syrian Kurdish region now. Third, of the 25 to 30, let's say there's about 25 to 30 million Kurds. There are 2 main movements, and as we know, the Kurds are very fragmented between the Kurds in Iraq under the Masoud Barzani and those under the PKK wing, and then of course different diversions within. The point is, this second group, this, let's say the PKK group, they are vastly more popular on the Kurdish streets right now than what we would think is, and what I would say Turkey would think is the Barzani group. Okay, if you took a vote today, who would be president of the Kurds, it would be Öcalan, not Barzani, and I don't endorse Öcalan, to say the least. Nonetheless, this is popular, and why it matters to Turkey is because Barzani is Turkey's ally, not Öcalan. There are more numbers. If you look at transborder, most of these numbers of the 25 to 30 million, minus 5 in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, most of these are in Syria and Turkey. Fifth, we've already discussed the weakened states and whether you want to call them failed states, weakened states, but this is a transborder Kurdish problem. Turkey's PKK problem is not just in Turkey, it's not just in Syria, now it's in Iraq. It's not even in just the Kandil Mountains. It's in this post-ISIS land grabs where PKK, PYD, PYG, they're all in northern Iraq and some of the areas in Sinjar, battling or attempting to implant themselves and try to gain influence as well. This is a problem for Turkey, and as you'll see, this is being played out in air campaigns and overlapping or coexisting with the ISIS campaign. And sixth, in the old days, Turkey, Ankara, Baghdad, Damascus, and Tehran, they could come together and, coordinate their Kurd policies. When one Kurdish group was threatening the territorial boundaries of the state, Turkey could count on its regional allies because they did generally have a shared policy about the Kurds. That alliance structure has broken down over the years, and those types of state actors to work with Turkey are no longer there, at least for now. In fact, the group that's benefiting from the state actors that used to help Turkey is the PKK. And you can see that again in Damascus. At the end of the day, in the late 90s, when the PKK was getting too strong in Damascus, the Turkish Ankara could contact Damascus, cut the deal, PKK's kicked out in 1999, and that was the end. Those days right now are over. And as Professor Burhanettin discussed, all of this is playing out in the absence of a single world leader in the Middle East to regulate this. So what's happened in Iraq? What has Turkey done? And I would say Turkey, from Turkish perspective, in my view, has done something pretty clever, which is, in some ways, take advantage of the friction between the the Erbil, Iraqi Kurds and Baghdad by bringing in Iraqi Kurds, by establishing these necessary economic and political relationships, so that as the Iraqi Kurds are moving away, or some seek to move away from Baghdad, they've almost become fully dependent on Ankara. And I've used the word client state, whatever word you want to use. Right now, I don't see the Iraqi Kurds maneuvering away from Ankara anytime soon because they don't have the leverage to do so. So this in some ways, or in many ways, gives Ankara a very positive relationship and leverage over, that is to say, if Ankara wants to put its military weapons or bring its tanks into northern Iraq, it can, because Barzani can't say no, and the Iraqi government doesn't have control. Now, where I see a problem, however, and this was, I would say, a miscalculation perhaps in terms of Turkey, is that by hoping to have Masoud Barzani, let's say, moderate and mediate the Kurdish problem across borders, I think Turkey overdetermined Barzani's leverage because he can't regulate the problem. As a matter of fact, it's almost a liability that to go into Syria with Barzani is not going to affect the PKK Kurds or similarly those in Turkey. So the one regional ally of the Kurds that Turkey is working with does have limited influence. And I would say that Turkey would need to look at the Sunni Arab Iraqi Kurd dynamics as they're going to be playing out in the post-ISIS conflict. There's going to have to be necessary relations between the Sunni Arabs and Iraqi Kurds because they border each other. But how the revenue sharing, power sharing, and resource sharing is going to work out will be something for Turkey to manage. I don't want to get too much into the Turkey issue because we've already discussed it. But I do want to say that it was discussed the HDP is hostage to the PKK, and I'll go into Syria and make the same comment. That is to say, this is a political wing of an armed group, not the other way around. So neither of this group, as the PKK is not getting the type of international criticism that it once was, that this can and it will be allowed to continue. Okay. There are many Kurds in the southeast that despise the PKK, and I think that that's one of the reasons why HDP lost so many votes in its second round. And I would continue, if I were Turkey, to try to bank on those divisions and try to enhance the carrots for all of those groups who see that the liability in the southeast is PKK. I do want to spend a couple more minutes on Syria, though. And this is where I see Iraq as a managed conflict, and I see Turkey as an intractable challenge. I see Syria as a potentially manageable challenge for Turkey under this one thing. First, Turkey's alarmed by all of these territorial gains by Syrian Kurds. And as Professor Burhanettin absolutely stated, that the Syrian Kurds have been able to benefit from all of this coalition support in fighting ISIS. They've recently crossed the Euphrates. There's going to be another disputed territories issue in Syria, just the way that it is from the political fallout of the ISIS campaign. As long as the war continues, the PYD will continue, and Syria will continue to be reliant on the PKK, because it's the PKK forces fighting for the PYG. They've recognized, they have been given some legitimacy as well, and of course they are in northern Iraq. But there's limitations, and I say this because I took a couple of trips to Iraq a few months ago, and one of those trips I spent some time with these Syrian Kurds. And it was an interesting conversation, different groups, PYG, all of them. And they said, we have a headless leader. There's a headless leader in Syria. And if I was Turkey, I'd be really taking advantage of that in the sense of it's the PKK itself that is not going to allow anybody, any charismatic leader, to challenge its leadership in Kandil. They've done it with Demirtas, and they will do it, and they are doing it in Syria. What I thought was surprising for me to hear Senator complain about is saying, most of our cantons are being run by, quote, Turkish-speaking Kurmanji speakers, which is Kurdish-speaking Turkish Kurmanji speakers from Turkey, that some of these Syrian Kurds actually want to have their own area and they want to run it themselves apart from some of the Kurds from Turkey. This, I thought, was something, but again, they can't dare do it because they're completely reliant on the PKK. There is no potential for independence for the Syrian Kurds, and they've said it, and they know it. They're fully reliant right now on Damascus. They're reliant on external support, and they've said, and I think too, at the end of the day, and it was said by Professor, Turkey's the only one that can negotiate this. And I would see this as a border trade and agreement. Final point on Syria. The Syrian Kurds are 8 to 10% of the population. The Sunni Arabs are about 70%. If there's not a deal to be done between the Sunni Arabs and Turkey, I don't see even how these Kurdish entities are going to exist. What it does mean for Turkey, although there's not going to be an independent state, this could be a launching pad to destabilize some of Turkey's borders. I want to make a couple of final points about what Turkey should do or can do. I fully agree that Turkey's critical, not only resolving the problem inside its own state, but in Syria as well. But there's going to have to be some hard choices. One, note that the Kurds are deeply divided, not only across states, but between themselves. And I would take advantage of that in the sense of not just divide and rule, but try to put carrots out to those Kurdish groups and see the benefits of economic stability as opposed to this nationalist, xenophobic nationalism. Secondly, there are tensions in some ways between Ankara and Baghdad, and I would strongly encourage our Turkish colleagues to work them through, because there's important energy agreements to be made, and the direct sideshow with the KRG is not sustainable, or it certainly will not maximize Turkey's energy interests. If there ever was to be a return, and I agree, a couple more minutes, that this is not the moment, you're absolutely right again, to renew this peace process in Turkey, but it should be done with the HDP, not just Öcalan. And I would bring it inside the Turkish parliament and put it on the shoulders of the HDP as well. Okay, one of the problems before that it wasn't including what the HDP will say were the real leaders. And finally, I'm looking through at Syria. There's so much opportunity for Turkey to take the lead in pushing economic development, rehabilitating Daesh-free territories, doing what in some ways it did in northern Iraq, in the Kurdish areas to Syria. And I know there's a lot of nationalism, but I also know that many of these Kurds want a stable region where they could live with security and electricity, and it's not going to come from, it's not going to come from Iran. It's going to have to come from regional neighbors that share a long border with Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Natali. And last, but definitely not the least, we have Marina Ottaway as our last speaker, fourth speaker. She's a senior scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center and a longtime analyst of political transformations in Africa, the Balkans, and the Middle East. She joined the Wilson Center after 14 years at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, during which she played a central role in launching the Middle East program. Again, you have 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. And remind me of the time. I have a tendency to lose track of the time when I talk.
I will do that.
The advantage of being the last speaker is that other speakers have already said at least some of what you were going to talk about. So I will partly go back to my original ideas, but also I would improvise to some extent to try to bring in some of the ideas that were expressed by other speakers. And the first point I wanted to make is to link the discussion to the issue that was brought up about the new Middle East and the end of Sykes-Picot and the new Middle East. And because we are going, like it or not, we are going to see a different Middle East emerging. I think it's a foregone conclusion that Iraq and Syria are never going to look the way they did before. I don't know what they are going to look, how they will look, but I'm pretty sure that they will not look the way they did before. And in this process, I think the Kurds are going to play a very important role. There is not going to be any single actor that's going to create the new Middle East, no more so than Sykes and Picot put together the Middle East that we know today. In fact, if you know anything about the history of that period, the borders of the Levant, of the present-day Levant, were not established by Sykes-Picot. And if you have any doubts, look at the map. That look totally different from anything that we are familiar with. But it was really determined very much by the regional dynamics by the participants in various countries, by various nationalist groups in various countries, and the way they influence the policies of the great powers of the day. And what we are going to see is exactly the same. I think you can be pretty sure that it's going to be the same kind of process that will take place, that is a multiplicity of actors that are going to determine the shape of things to come, whatever they are. And among the actors that are going to be important in this process, the Kurds are going to play an important role, because the Kurds, for a variety of reasons, have started putting some markers on the ground. Particularly in Iraq, the Kurds have, going back many years now, going back to the imposition of the no-fly zone, going back to the Kurdish nationalism going way back, but then to the imposition of the no-fly zone by the United States after the first Gulf War. Essentially, the Kurds have created in Iraq facts on the ground. They have created an autonomous region. It's not paradise. It's facing very serious economic problems. It's facing very serious political problems, because we all know that the Kurds in Iraq are very divided among themselves, and so on and so forth. But essentially, there is a region there. There is something that is just not going to disappear, no matter what happens. I am not going to make prediction what the future of Iraqi Kurdistan is going to be exactly, but it's not going to become just another province in the future Iraq. It's bound to have a special thing. Now, these facts on the ground create different challenges. In Syria too, I think, you are beginning to see the beginning of facts on the ground being created in the course of this conflict. There is nothing quite, the Kurdish area of Syria are not quite as well defined as the KRG is. Certainly in terms of their governing, there is much more gray area there about exactly what is the relationship between Damascus and the Kurdish areas. It's much more gray than it is the relationship between Baghdad and Erbil, which is quite clear cut. It's much more embryonic, if you want, what is emerging in Syria, but very definitely there are facts on the ground emerging in Syria as well. Now, from the point of view of Turkey and its Kurdish problem, and I'm looking here at the Kurdish problem as a foreign policy issue, not as a domestic issue. Obviously, two are linked, but I'm just looking at the foreign policy issue. These facts on the ground mean that there are two different Kurdish challenges for Turkey. That it's not that the challenge posed by the KRG is very different from the challenge posed by the cantons controlled by the Kurds in Syria. The relations with the KRG are fairly simple, in the sense that finally Turkey seems to have accepted the reality on the ground. I think in a way Turkey has accepted the reality of the KRG much more clearly than the United States has. It's accepted the fact that there is this region that is, that has a life of its own. People always refer to the KRG as being the Iraqi Kurdistan as being semi-autonomous. I would call it as being semi-independent. I mean, I don't see how more autonomous it could be without becoming independent. And Turkey has come to see the benefits of this situation, to see it not only as a problem, but also as a benefit. That the KRG can become, particularly if things settle down, a very important source of energy for Turkey, particularly as gas comes into production. The Turks are hoping that this is going to become a very important source of gas for producing electricity. The gas pipelines are being built, and so on. Essentially, there has been a reconciliation of Turkey by Turkey of the idea that the KRG is going to, that Iraqi Kurdistan is going to be an autonomous or somewhat independent region. I don't know, and here there are other people here who know better than I am, whether Turkey would be willing to, at this point, to accept the full independence of Kurdistan, to give it diplomatic relations. But the de facto independence of Kurdistan is a fact that Turkey has, I would say, not only has accepted, but also that it's benefiting from, to some extent. Yes, the KRG is very dependent on Turkey, but that's not necessarily a bad thing for Turkey to have essentially a somewhat a client state of sorts. And the KRG is allowing Turkey to maintain to maintain troops in the area. It's allowing them to operate in the Kandil Mountains when they go after the PKK and so on. So that essentially it's a relationship that is quite beneficial to Turkey. It's a bit different in the case with the Kurdish areas of Syria, because I think there Turkey is much more ambivalent because of the presence of the PKK and the relations that exist between the PKK and the YPG. In many ways, the two policies are in conflict with each other, because on one side we have a Turkey that accepts the de facto independence of Iraqi Kurdistan. But on the other hand, we have tremendous resistance to the situation that exists in northern Syria, where these cantons are really not accepted. There is an attempt by Turkey, I don't know whether it will continue to be successful, to prevent the Kurds from establishing control of the entire border area that is moving west of Euphrates. But certainly there is very little acceptance of the situation there. And in turn, and this becomes a vicious circle, because while the KRG is very careful not to provoke Turkey and not to take steps that are against the interest of Turkey, the YPG is not. And they are talking, Natali says there are in fact Russian troops on the ground. I was not aware of it, but small numbers, but certainly the YPG has been talking very openly, including here in Washington, about the fact that they see intervention of Russia in very favorable light, because that might give them what they, the help they want in moving on the other side of Euphrates and continuing their border region. So essentially, in many ways, you say, I'm hesitant to draw conclusion, because on one side you are tempted to say, well, this policy of what you could call constructive engagement with the KRG is paying fruits for Turkey. I'm not too sure that you say that, but they are, and therefore they should have the same policy of constructive engagement, the YPD, because I'm not sure that the situation is parallel at this point, that the YPD would be as willing to engage with Turkey. At this point, there is no sign, if Turkey was more willing to engage with them. The last point that I want to make is the existence of these two very different Kurdish situations, one in Syria and one in Iraq, are a challenge to all the regional actors, not just to Turkey, which has the biggest challenge because, of course, it's related to the domestic Kurdish problem, what they do, but it's also a challenge for other actors that are present in the region. I would say it's a big challenge for the United States, that to this day maintains the position that Iraq has to remain one country, that it's not in favor of a breakup of Iraq, but that this, and therefore is in a very ambiguous situation in relations with the KRG. That's, yes, it provides, you know, it's, while dependent very much on the KRG, on the Kurds, to control ISIS on the sort of in that area, at the same time it's not willing to deal to give the Kurds the kind of help that they have been asking, and that of course is a matter of great resentment. You have a parallel situation in Syria, where again the United States is trying to enlist the help of the Kurds in moving, in trying to regain control of some areas from ISIS, but at the same time it's also trying to stop the YPG from moving to the other side of the Euphrates. It's a bit a situation of wanting something from the Kurds, but not being willing to give very much in return. Again, I don't think there are easy solutions to this, there are easy answers, but I think let me conclude with my starting point, that the Kurds are already, and they will continue to be, a major determinant in the kind of, I will not say a new Middle East, but let's say a new Levant that emerges in the coming period.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ottaway. Officially, we have 20 minutes left for the question and answer session, and I promise I will not steal more time from your lunch break. So let's start our question and answer session as soon as possible. Please state your name and affiliation, and please take your question as short as possible. Go ahead. You have the microphone coming.
Thank you so much. My name is Lucy Osoyan. I'm from EZD Relief Fund, actually the founder. I'm not here on behalf of any political party or against. I'm here on behalf of humanity. So I've been trying to learn Kurdish issue. I'll be very brief, but please try to make my points, right? So I've been trying to learn Kurdish issue because we are Yazidi. Fortunately, I didn't grow up in Turkey, so it's kind of complicated for me to put in one word what Kurds are facing and why all this issue raised in Turkey today. Thanks to Mr. Mahcupyan, he put in one word, equal citizenship. Ladies and gentlemen, does anyone in this room knows or feels the equal citizenship? What does that feel?
Okay, do you have a question?
Okay.
Please.
So that brought us back to 1915s, which Armenian Dashnak, right?
Please.
And today, Kurdish PKK raised. So I have a question to panelists. You know, your president, Erdogan, says, if you bring me evidence, Turkish co-worker work with ISIS, he will resign. Today, Russia provide all evidence, and Mr. Erdogan is still there. Why?
Thank you. Sir.
Dr. Meyerowitz from SUNY Maritime College. Tip O'Neill, not a Turkish scholar, used to say all politics is local. So I think Denise, in her dazzling, excuse me for saying that, just wonderful overview of this whole issue, talked a little bit about the HDP. So here's my question. Could there be a solution to this crisis because President Erdogan is looking for enough votes to have a referendum for the presidential system, to form a coalition with the HDP? I know it seems inconceivable right now, but maybe to do that, to get enough seats, because he doesn't need a lot more seats in order to achieve at least to that point. Because maybe, in a very bizarre way, the options to do that coalition might be more possible than even a coalition with CHP or MHP. So do you think that's even a possibility or a likelihood? And could that solve and wrap around the whole issue and bring a comprehensive issue to this situation?
Thank you. Let's have two more questions. Then we'll give the floor to the panelists. I have one over there. Ellen?
Thank you very much. Alan Makovsky with the Center for American Policy. Denise, you mentioned that the YPG is operating west of the Euphrates River, which of course was one of Turkey's red lines. I just wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit. Also, Turkey, I believe, had 4 red lines. That was one of them. The other 3 were no arms to the PKK, no staging operations by the YPG in Turkey, and no ethnic cleansing. And I just wondered if you know, anyone on the panel wants to comment on whether or not the YPG has been crossing those red lines.
Thank you. Can you pass the microphone to the left, please, Alan? Thank you.
Hi, Yerevan Said from Kurdish Ulutas News Agency. I'm wondering, you know, what complications Kurds have caused for the U.S.-Turkish relations. You know, there has been some, you know, concerns by Turkey about how the U.S. treats the Kurds. I'm wondering if that will be the trend in the future. Thanks.
Okay. Etyen, do you want to shoot?
I'll comment on the coalition with HDP question, maybe. Now, that was a chance a year ago, but HDP decided otherwise because of PKK, of course. So they had a better opportunity in Syria. They didn't want to lose that. And the motto, "I will not make you president," you know, was saying that I will not cooperate with you on anything. So from that moment on, the votes that HDP, you know, kind of a relation with HDP may bring will cause more votes maybe for AK Party going away from AK Party. So it's not a very realistic situation for AK Party. Now, the real problem with this new solution, the referendum and the new constitution and so on and so forth, is that AK Party is getting more votes than the 30% of the Islamic community as such, because of the new middle class and all that, which tend to honor, let's say, a kind of a different quality in the government. So I think the AK Party has the advantage of now, if they want to do it, to go to kind of surpass itself, you know, to be really a kind of a more democratic, to have a more democratic attitude and so on, and then use that advantage. If they can do that, they will have a very important benefit, and maybe this is the point that I will differ from many panelists here. Don't underestimate the sociology. And the sociology, I mean the Kurdish sociology in Turkey. Now PKK is inviting them to fight, and no one is coming. Even the PKK families are not in the streets. So they are expecting something else. If AK Party can give that something else to the Kurds, then we will have an internal issue per se, and not an external issue anymore. Thank you.
Marina, you want to add?
Yes, I would just address the issue of the complication that the Kurds pose for US-Turkey relation. I don't think they are a major problem at this point. They might have been in the past when the United States was more accepting, essentially, or particularly the KRG, than Turkey was. But at present, it's more the other way around. That it is that Turkey, by and large, is much more acceptance of the autonomy of the KRG than the United States is willing to be, at least openly. The United States continues to to have a very guarded position on that. So I don't think there is a major problem in the relationship between the two. The Turkish insistence that the YPG does not cross west of the Euphrates does make it a little more difficult for the United States to enlist the Kurds to fight against ISIS elsewhere. But by and large, I don't think this is a major problem.
Denise?
Yeah, I'll go down. So, I don't know which Kurds you're talking about, so let's just say, and I partially agree with Marina, that it's not that big an issue between the Iraqi Kurds and U.S.-Turkey relations, because the Iraqi Kurds are not really a threat. I do disagree with Marina a bit. I actually see the Iraqi Kurds have lost autonomy. They have become more independent. Because they're so dependent on Turkey, they've lost foreign policy autonomy. That they can't, it's not that they're being more welcoming or careful with Turkey, they don't have a choice. So they have no choice. So for the United States, that's not really the issue because, and I will make a second disagreement, I don't think Sykes-Picot is over. The reordering inside the states, absolutely. But Russia, Iran, Turkey, nobody wants to see an independent, these states break up, these two states. But they will be severely weakened. Where I do see Kurds from Turkey or Syria have, let's say, pressured U.S.-Turkey relations, and that is in the coalition's support and enabling of the YPG. You know, Turkey's threat perceptions of the PKK, and many of us said this last year when this was starting. I mean, you know, we understand the need to use partners on the ground, but we also have an extremely important regional ally, and that is Turkey, who's been fighting this for 30 years. So I don't see why anybody would be surprised that Turkey reacted the way that it did, and this is the issue. I don't think it's Iraqi Kurds, I think it's the Kurds from Turkey. Mark, to answer your question, I just don't see it now. Why, there would have to be an enormous concession to the HDP, and the only way for the HDP, you're right, it's local politics, is to get credibility, is to have some kind of local governance. So there's too much invested in the PKK needs to keep the war going. I would quite frankly try to divide these groups. I fully agree that there are many, many Kurds that are so fed up with the PKK that they've taken hostage to southeast Turkey, but there still is not enough incentives or ways to bring them out of it. So I don't see that. When I said the YPG west of the Euphrates, they're recently pushing to get there, Alan. Okay? Now, taking these territories is one thing, holding them is another. And there may be temporarily facts being created on the ground, but they can easily be reversed. I mean, these facts are on the ground because the coalition airstrikes are there to protect these borders, right? Or to protect them. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't see how the YPG can control these territories where they have a minor presence and there are a vast majority of Sunni Arabs. So if they go to lead or work with an Arab force to move west of the Euphrates, in my view, there's got to be a deal made, and they have to leave. But that is part of it, and I would imagine that that would ruffle Turkey's feathers as well. I think I've been... They just push. I mean, other than offering, but I mean in the... Pushing.
Okay. Burhanettin?
Yeah, first with the question of HDP, I totally agree with Etyen and Denise. There was an option for HDP to form a new Turkey, actually, both literally and figuratively, to form a new Turkey with collaboration with the AK Party. But this is a lost chance because they preferred the attractive capital of anti-AK Party politics in Turkey. So for the time being, I don't see any possibility of such a coalition between HDP and AK Party for any issue of Turkish politics. And PYD, well, yes, you know, this politics of red line is very difficult. And I remember one of the red line policy was evaporating, belongs to Obama's policy of chemical weapons regarding Syria. So this is very difficult, and it is very difficult for Turkey to limit PYD. Turkey is not against PYD's existence at all. Of course, they represent something in Syria, but when they extend their dominance into all northern Syria and beyond, this is creating two critical issues. One is regarding Turkey's concerns of unity and security. You know, there are some 5 cities very close in the border, and it is very easy for flow of terrorists and weapons to Turkey from Kobani. And the second one is the future of Sunni Arabs in Syria. What will be their future? If you push more, I am saying this for the US and Russia, if you push PYD more into Sunni Arabs cities, so what will be the result in the post-ISIS era? So these are major challenges for the future of Syria and for U.S. policy in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have time to entertain a couple more questions before wrapping up. Please. Again, as short as possible, please. Microphone here, Gloria.
Thank you. I have a question regarding, my name is Mohammed Ahmed Al-Sharif. Recently, the U.S. Clearly said that they no longer will provide any support to the Kurds in fighting ISIS for logistical training and so on. And at the same time, Turkey opened their airspace to the U.S. Coalition, their allies for fighting ISIS. I want to hear, what do you think of this move? Why the U.S. decided not to provide any more support to the Kurds and for logistical support in fighting ISIS?
Thank you. There was someone raising hand over there. Lady over there, black.
My name is Amber Zaman. I'm a Turkish journalist, and my question is for all the members of the panel, and it's as follows. How long do you believe that the United States can maintain its relationship, its alliance with the YPG, all the while refusing to condemn the violence against the Kurds inside Turkey, the gross human rights abuses that are happening as we sit here?
Thank you. And last question here.
Ilhan Kagri from the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I had a phone call this morning from a Kurdish friend who belongs to a rather large family with a large network of middle-class Kurds who live in the Mardin-Dargachit area and who are very much AK Party supporters. These are, flag-waving, Turkish flag-waving Kurds, and their whole network. These are, people and their friends are all flag-waving Turks. So the question he asked me is, aside from telling me how bad things were in the region, he was saying, Abla, I don't understand why the media paints us all with one big brush. It's one broad brush. And to take on Denise's point, there's no place for these people to go. There's no room left for them. So how is this serving the interests of Turkey to not allow those Kurdish people who never supported the PKK, never wanted to support the PKK, you're pushing them off the cliff. So the question is twofold. One, does the government not recognize that there are these large numbers of Kurds who, detest PKK and any kind of violence? And two, why is the media complicit in just painting these, all Kurds with this broad brush?
Okay, thank you. Let's start from the right this time and go all the way to the left.
Well,
you have 4 minutes, so you have 1 minute.
Yeah. Yeah, we're very tough to deal with this kind of city guerrilla warfare in Southeast Turkey. As far as I know, there are some times to people to leave this time of struggle, but the government is trying to make this fight against the PKK with some considerations and difficulties, but for the time being, it is creating at the same time some costs as well, for not only for PKK Kurds or all Kurds. This is very apparent, this is very clear, but as soon as the PKK hegemony is abolished in these cities, there will be resettlement and settlement and curing all the problems of the cities. Okay, that's what I think.
To your question about, I don't recall the United States saying they're going to stop, and there was never direct support to the YPG, and they didn't say that they're going to stop it. My understanding was when the train and equipment program was indicated that it failed miserably, having trained just a handful of folks, there's a move toward not training new forces to fight in Syria, but equipping those already fighting. At the end of the day, you need Turkey on board. You can't just, and for the Kurds themselves, there will be a backlash against Syrian Kurds who represent 8 to 10 of the population. There has to be a joint force with Sunni Arab groups inside Syria. So there's there's support still going on as part of a Syrian National Democratic Force. The Kurds can't have it any other way. They will have a backlash. That's my answer to that one. Why does the media pay to, why does the media do so many things? Because there's lobbyists with photos of women, with Peshmerga. It's all become very, very emotional, right? This has been a championship against Daesh, and here are the freedom fighters that are going to do it. We've done this in many regards. So to make it more nuanced in the way that you want to say, and I fully agree with you, that requires people having to get into more nuance, and rather than this very simplistic story of three Kurdistans emerging because we have good guys and we have bad guys. But I think that this is important because we're going to get it wrong, that there are a lot of Kurds in southeast Turkey that are hostage to this group and that we're missing. Amberin, I'd love to get more into your question, but I have to say from a larger policy perspective, do I think that there's fundamental problems inside Turkey in terms of all groups, and you know more than me? Yes. But I also have to know from a foreign policy perspective that we have, whether our relationship is on a bit of a weak point right now, a very critical, essential U.S. ally, Turkey, in the region, okay? And so do I have to say, do we take the PKK or PYG, or do we take Turkey? I mean, this is almost a no-brainer. But I don't think it's going to be either, but still, maintaining some kind of role for this region in a positive way that Turkey could influence. But I just don't see, particularly in the region, what's going on now, that we're going to say, goodness, Turkey, you're violating, and like I said, it's relevant and you're right. But we have to look at this as our larger foreign policy needs.
Marina?
Yeah, I don't have much to add, in fact, but just in your question about the media and why is there a place for these people to go. And essentially the answer is very simple, that in all these situations it's the radical groups that take over, and it does not matter what the numbers actually are, but they are the ones that end up by imposing their views and getting all the attention.
That's right.
The non-PKK people, they exist, and of course the government is aware of it, but the government has a kind of a, let's say, wrong psychology right now, I would say. The government wants to be understood by the people, but the people are not satisfied by just understanding why government does that. They expect the government to walk on two legs instead of one. And the first leg is, war on terror and so on, but the second leg should be something positive for those people. And the government, of course, there are reasons to that, but at the end, when we come to the aspirations of the Kurds in general, when they look at Ankara, now for so many years, after so many years, they expect something more and quick. And it seems to me that the government, the Turkish government, is not ready for that yet. Now, when we come to the media manifests this in an acute way. I would say that the Turkish media on both sides, I mean, pro-government, against the government, is paralyzed. They are political activists more and more. It is not a proper media anymore. And I would say that this media is corrupting the public sphere. So we cannot see even what the government is doing positively today, because the pro-government media does not talk about that, does not give proper news. So it was the result of the fight. Of course, we can understand that starting 2013 with the Gezi and so on and so forth. But now, when we come to this point, it's a bottleneck for the Turkish democracy, and it's a big burden on the shoulders of the government. And maybe the government should start doing something with the media immediately, if possible.
Thank you, Etyen. Well, a very complex question and great insights. Please join me in applauding our panelists and enjoy your lunch.